Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar, Top 10 Tips for Autodesk AEC Collection and Working with Point Cloud Data. My name is Iqbal Gurewal. I'm Technical Support Manager here at CADpoint. To give you some background, CADpoint is based in Crowthorne, Berkshire, and is a gold partner for Autodesk software. We have a team of experts ready to assist you in all aspects of design. We are also partners with some of the most trusted hardware manufacturers in the industry, including HP, Nvidia, etc. As well as software, our team can also offer introductory training for new customers and advanced courses for experienced users to help you get more from your software. Moving on to our technical consultant, Jonathan, who will be speaking to you today in this webinar. I will pass it over to you, Jonathan. Without further ado.
So my background is as an architectural technologist. I've qualified with a degree in architectural technology. I have a master's degree in BIM management, and I've also worked as a BIM manager as well. And now I focus on the Autodesk and BIM training side of things as well. So while my background is in architecture and architectural technology, I have used point cloud in my architectural roles. I'm not a surveyor, but I have used point cloud in my architectural role, so it's extremely relevant across disciplines. So that's the kind of point of view I'll be coming from today with my top 10 tips. So I'm just going to run through a couple of slides, and then I've prepared some videos of the top 10 tips that I'll show after a couple of slides. So in today's construction and design projects, we see a lot of challenges, including design errors being caused from inaccurate or existing conditions on site. So if you're integrating with an existing building, or if you're making renovations, you're going to get a lot of issues in terms of inaccuracies, and something like point cloud can help support more efficiencies by capturing quite accurate data as well. And obviously with BIM being used on a lot more projects in the last number of years, something like point cloud scans and 3D scans fits in nicely into a BIM or a 3D model when you think of they're both essentially 3D models at a very basic description. And then you can also monitor construction progress using something like point clouds as well. Even if it's a greenfield site you're building on, you're still able to capture maybe boundary conditions, maybe trees that are existing on site, or even the topographical information using something like a point cloud as well, or the surrounding context. Perhaps you've service like telephone poles or electrical cables. You can capture all of these using something like point cloud in existing conditions on both a brownfield or a greenfield site. And some of the current practices that you might see on sites during construction, using distos and lasers, while these are a technology in themselves, and even using measuring tapes, you'll still see a lot of they can leave inaccuracies as well, particularly for capturing angles of things that might be slightly skewed. You won't necessarily capture that using something just like a laser measurer as well. And this is going to impact then once that information gets to site, whether you've designed something around that information, and if it gets to site, it can be inaccurate and can cause issues as well. So this allows you to create your drawings, obviously, but only maybe in a CAD format at a very basic level, without capturing those kind of skewed elements as well. And then you have to go in and do maybe some sort of eyeball testing of, okay, that wall kind of looks off, maybe it doesn't. But if you had something like a point cloud, you could capture that once and you wouldn't have to go back and then make drawings, updates to your drawings as well. And as we see with laser scan technology, we do still have obviously topographical surveying stations, like on the left-hand side, but they are quite heavy and they are quite expensive, and they still obviously do have their use. But we do see, a huge change in the technology in terms of its downsizing and its mobility for something like the Leica BLK360, or other examples of mobile scanning solutions as well are also available. And I've also recently seen that I think the new iPad Pro has some sort of LiDAR scanner built into it as well. And to kind of put point clouds in context of a BIM project, for example, on the left-hand side, you can see that we have point cloud data captured in all of the kind of dark elements on the screen. And on the right-hand side, we've got our BIM model, or our Navisworks model, in fact, from our design intent, taken from our 3D data or taken from our Revit model. And then we can just bring in the point cloud using Recap Pro, into something like Navisworks or into Revit, and just compare it either during the construction or after the project has finished as well. And the process for doing that is simply capturing your data on site, whether with Faro or Leica equipment or different type of laser supplier, or whether that's drone scanning or fixed graphical tripods or equipment on site as well. That's then processed or what's called registered through Recap Pro. And then you can integrate that into other Autodesk workflows as well, such as AutoCAD, InfraWorks, Revit, AutoCAD Civil 3D, and Navisworks as well. So there's a lot of integrations that you can work with that as well. So I'm just going to jump into the video that I've prepared showing some of the tips to get you started with point cloud data and to be able to bring that information then into Revit from an architectural point of view.
So when you open Autodesk Recap Pro first, it's quite a basic kind of user interface. You've got a toolbar across here with about 6 tools, new project on the left-hand side. You can see what's new. If you want any of your recent projects will show up in the bottom left here. And if you click open, it will open your most recent project from here as well. Just within the settings, you have a couple of different options here, including what is your current coordinate system. And you're able to change that as well to what system you want it to be. You can change the project units, obviously working from imperial to metric or from millimeters to meters, etc., or even kilometers if your scans are that kind of size. And you can change the precision from there as well. So I'm just going to open up a sample Revit file or a sample recap file that will be imported into Revit. So you can see here, as we zoom in, we can see all of the points that have been captured on site from a laser scan. You can also see that the imagery has been applied to that laser scan, or the photogrammetry has been captured within that as well. So this captures some external building, some electrical type of site going on here as well. So all we want to do is capture this information, the site surrounding information, because we're going to actually construct a building within this particular site inside of Revit. So very easy to navigate around in 3D orbit and 3D space. You can see we've got some trees there that were also captured. And the purpose of the site, you can obviously see that it's at the center of the scan as the kind of building and the point clouds fade out. So as you zoom in, you can see all the different points that were captured. If you click on these, the mirror balls, they will bring you to the actual images that were captured on site. Just takes a second to bring you into that 360-degree image, but that's the actual image that was captured from the tripod or from the actual survey equipment on site. And that just allows you to then rotate around that particular piece of equipment within that as well. So we can see here the actual imagery of that point cloud that was captured on site, and we can see we've got another piece of surveying equipment here. And we can also see we've got our target markers here, and this just allows the scanning equipment on site to capture its information and then process it in the background by having these common points within it as well. If I click on another mirror ball, that also represents another equipment, and you can another survey equipment, and you can see in your plan view here, it's also showing you all the different points. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different stations in total. So you can see here as I rotate around, again, same as we did. If I wanted to go back to my other 3D view, just hit 3D view. That will bring me back into the point cloud. And I can, again, if I want to, go into the mirror balls for whatever reason in there. To import a point cloud data that you may have got from a surveyor or from a point cloud equipment, like Faro or Leica or any other type of topographical survey equipment, you simply go to new project. You'll be presented with 3 different options. You've got import point cloud. You can transfer from mobile device as well if you got access to the app on iPad Pro, and also photo to 3D, which is Autodesk Recap Photo. So what that allows you to do is just upload photographs, and it will actually create a mesh just from the photographs without any point cloud data. So that's just another benefit of Recap Pro. So we're just going to go into import point cloud. So I'm just going to come out of that project that I was in. I'm just going to click don't save on that, and it's going to ask me, do I want to name this project? I'm just going to leave it at new project number 5 for default, and it's asked me where do you want to then save your files. So I'm just going to hit proceed on that, and it's a simple drag and drop option. So I'm just going to go into my folder where I know I have these particular files stored. So I go into my software recap, and I know that I have my files within here, and I am simply just going to pull those files and drag and drop them. So this then gives you a series of options that are presented on this screen. You got filtering, text options, and advanced options as well. So within this intensity clipping, all this is doing is asking you what intensity of points do you want in your project. So, but how many of them do you want Recap to actually auto discard for you? So if I bring this down to 100% or down to 0%, it's going to bring in every single point within that particular point cloud file that you've received or captured. If I put it up to 100%, it's going to analyze every single point and it's going to check if every point is relevant. Therefore, if you've got a vertical wall, for example, it doesn't need to necessarily bring in every single point on that particular wall if it deviates only by 1 or 2 mil, for example. So that's what that intensity does there. Next, I'm just going to click on import files. So that's just going to bring in all of my options, and it's all of my scans, and it's telling me here that it's found a file that shouldn't be in there, and that's correct. It's actually found the surveying report didn't need to be in that folder. So it's brought in 8 different points or 8 different location points here. So these are all of our surveying stations, and what's going to do is it's going to do something called registrate them. Or registration, which is bringing all of them together and making sure that they all line up within the Recap environment. So when you're launching your project and when you're actually registering your scans, it gives you 2 options. One is skip registration and the other is manual registration. So what registration actually does, it actually combines all of the different, the 8 different points in this, or the 8 different locations of your surveying equipment. So if you select manual registration, you're going to have to do a certain amount of manual work, obviously, to line up all of those 8 different captures. Because when you think about it, it's 8 different cloud files, and what the registration does is it actually lines them up using the targets that were placed on site. So in most cases, you want to use auto registration. I don't know why you would use manual registration, but you want to do auto registration, and then it will just process them and take a couple of minutes. So you can see here it brings you up a dialog, and that will just progress through a percentage of how long it's taking. One of the items I just want to touch on as a tip is to understand decimation. So within your import settings, you will have had an option for your decimation settings. But just to understand decimation, if we zoom in on our point cloud file, we can see we've got quite a lot of point clouds, or what are appearing as pixels almost, within our point cloud. As we zoom in, our decimation settings are in fact if you can imagine that we've got a grid on our floor here, and our decimation settings is per millimeter. So our decimation settings can be 0 millimeter. If you set that to 50 millimeters, you will only have a point every 50 millimeters. So every point will be 50 millimeters apart. You can set it to 5 millimeters, so every point is 5 millimeter apart. So everything within that particular square of 5 millimeters, there will be no points within there. So you can imagine it has benefits in terms of file size, but obviously you lose a certain amount of information. So just to be conscious of that as well. Just in your decimation settings, these are found just before you actually launch your project to be auto registered. So if you go to advanced settings, so we saw filtering where we had the intensity clipping. In advanced settings, we can see that the decimation settings are set to 0 millimeter. So that means that it's going to maximize the number of points that it brings in. If I bring it up to 33 millimeters, for example, or even up to 47, let's say 18, that means that anything within an 18 millimeter square grid on our particular file, there will be no points within that. So depending on the type of information or the type of detail that you're trying to capture, you will move that decimation setting accordingly. If we need to select manual registration for whatever reason, as it does happen that not every register can be auto scanned, as it can't find common points across all of the surveying stations. So you can manually registrate elements, and using the targets within the project that were placed on the site, you're able to use certain tools within Recap to be able to pinpoint to those particular. So in order to do that, it basically brings up each scan in two separate windows. So on the left hand side we've got one scan, we can see it's number 11, and on the right hand side we've got all of the other scans. So what it's actually asking me to do here, I've got a tool down here, I can hover over this particular one, and I want to capture the target elements that were actually captured on site. That's why it's good to use target elements on site on stationary objects. You don't want to place it on something that is going to move. Therefore, in each scan we know that this is a common point. So therefore I can just capture this, zoom in as close as you can, just clicking in there, giving it a name, whatever the name is, hit accept. Then proceeding the same within this particular one for wherever you have that common target. So this particular one is 9805. So what we want to do then is find the same target within this particular one that is also 9805, which we know is this one. So I'm just going to click that one. It's also going to call that 9805. Click accept. Make sure this one is called 9805. Click accept. And I'm just going to hit merge scan. You would then proceed capturing each common element in the various different scans. In this case, we had, I think, 8 scans. You would go into each of the 8 scans and match the common points within them. And just to show you as an example, within one scan, this is from one surveying station. These are the only points that it captures alone. So obviously we need it to register for all of the 8 particular locations that were captured on site as well. Then you would merge all of those elements after selecting the common points using the target tool, and that would then present to you your manually registered 3D. In order to maintain your quality of your mesh, it is always better to use the auto registration if possible. So we can see here on the left hand side, I've just brought up a simple report of our registration. And basically this just tells us that all of these 8 location or surveying location points have been captured, and the overlap of them is 0%, and the balance of them 0%, and any points out by 6 mil are 0%. Therefore, the auto registration has perfectly aligned them. You can imagine through manual registration, you're going to be off by a couple of the mil. While that not matter in every project, there may be certain accuracies required on certain projects. So auto registration in most cases is better in order to maintain your quality of your mesh or your point cloud data. In terms of checking the quality of that report, you can also output that to, or export that, or output it to a TXT file and just save it in wherever your project is. So I'm just going to save this. Depending what the purpose of this is, if you wanted for whatever reason to feed this back to a surveyor, in terms of if there were accuracies that weren't correct, or if they were extremely out of line, you'd be able to show the X, Y, and Z coordinates that were so far out of line here in this particular TXT document. The next tip I want to cover is just understanding your selection techniques or your selection tools within the Recap environment. So you can see here our particular view is we've got all our points in our elements, we've got our mirror balls of all of our 360-degree elements, and say we want to isolate a certain amount of points within this particular environment. So we'd hover down to window, and by default window is selected. I'd simply just select window, and I would just hover over an element that I want to select, and you can see it has only selected those particular elements. So you can see everything is highlighted in white. So everything that's highlighted in white is obviously selected. If I select clip outside, it's going to delete all of those elements and only leaving me with the points internally within that. But what I can actually do is just unclip that for a moment. And I'm just going to go back here. So we're actually looking in a perspective view here. So when you use your window, it's going to select points what you think are directly in there, obviously, but it's obviously going to capture some obscure elements as well because of the perspective view. So I'm just going to clear that selection for a moment. I'm just going to go up to my top view here. or down to my view on my second tab, sorry, toggle UI elements. So perspective is enabled. So I'm just going to disable that, and let's just going to bring it to a orthographic view. So what that is now going to do is enable me to select elements that won't be captured in a perspective element and capturing some obscure elements, for example. So I'm just going to, again, capture this, hit my window and flip outside, and I've got a nice square there, no perspective elements being brought into it, and I only want to capture these elements of the site just for the purpose of this demonstration. So that's just clipping the points and being able to capture elements within inside a certain box. But if I also want to use the plane capture, so a plane will allow you to pick a certain amount of points and it will capture everything within a specified distance of that particular plane. So say, for example, I want to capture the ground level in here. I select the plane tool and then I'm going to place 4 dots. You can place 1, 2, or 3, or 4. I'm going to hit 3. And then on the 4th one, I'm just going to double click it. And what that is going to do, it's going to capture everything within 68 millimeters of those 4 points, allowing you to capture different planes. So obviously for flatter floor areas, it's going to capture more information, but within this particular green space, it highlights it in green. So everything within there is within the 68 millimeters and only within those particular 4 points. What I can then do is create something called a region within that. So if it was a separate floor area, I could just create that as a region, and that captures that as a separate element. So within those 4 points, I'm able to then turn off everything that doesn't fall within that particular 68 millimeters or whatever this particular dimension is, or plane depth that you set. So I can hit clip outside, and it's going to clear everything that doesn't fall within that particular 68 millimeters. So this works in a similar way to how layers work in maybe graphical programs. I can see on the right hand side, anything that I captured on a particular region is appearing here as a different layer. So I can turn that on or off if I want. So I'm just going to unflip the last. But that just allows you to break up your point clouds into different elements and capture maybe different floor areas or different wall sections within your registration. Within our registration, or within our recap environment, we also have distance tools. We can place notation as well, but we also have distance tools. So I'm just going to click on the distance tool, and I'm just going to zoom in on this table, for example, and I want to capture the points between the 2 legs of this table. So I can just hover in there, and I'm just going to turn off ortho and turn it to freehand. And I can see as I get closer to the particular table leg, you can see the small disc is changing direction. Therefore, I know that I'm getting closer to the vertical of that table leg. So we've got 7.76 meters is the distance. It also gives you obviously Z, Y, and X coordinates as well for that. Within the selection tools, we also have something called a limit box. So I'm just going to click on the limit box, and it's very similar to a section box if you do use Revit, and it just allows you to create a section box directly through your point cloud scan and being able to cut at a certain height. So you can imagine if you have different floor levels or whatever different heights, just by clicking, pulling it down through your model, and you can see all of everything above that particular section cut is disappearing as we go. When you click confirm, that will turn that off, and all it does is it just hides it in the background. You can also turn that back on as well. In order to clean up your scan data, you're going to probably use the fence tool most likely. And this is just going to allow you to custom trim around certain elements within your particular project. So all I'm going to do is just going to go to a top view, and I'm actually going to make sure that that is turned on to my perspective is turned off. So perspective view is turned off. So I've just got my top view. So all I'm going to do, I want to get rid of any of the surrounding data within this particular element. So I'm just going to place a line, and I want to come by the back of that wall, back of that. And then just on your last point, you're just going to want to double click. So we've got 4 points here. We've got 1 point here, down here, down here. Just going to double click on that. That's then going to select all of those points. So I can choose to delete the selection if I want, or I can choose to, again, clip outside of that particular element as well. So just to look at some of the annotation tools, so we already touched on maybe using the distance tool, but to be able to place notes within your recap project, simply just hover over your annotation, select note, and this just allows you to leave notes in your project for either other colleagues coming in to use your project, or for you perhaps coming back to a registered scan at a later date, and you just want to maybe make some notes. Perhaps make some notes on particular elements just by clicking once, and you might want to say what's going to happen to these particular elements. So remove shed, it's going to be demolished. You might want to add an image, maybe it's getting replaced with something, maybe there's a particular finish or a specification. You just click OK on that, and all of those notes are attached to that particular location wherever you click. So if I just click again, note, I want to click on this table, for example, the surveyor's table that was left there. And I just want to put a note, say this is surveyor's table, just to know that that's not part of the actual structure that's being scanned or to be removed as well. It just keeps it clear for anyone coming along. Then on the right hand side here, any annotations are captured within your layers table here. So I can go down to annotations and I can see the first dimension that I cut has been captured. I can add notes to that if I want, and then any of the further notes that I've also captured have also been added under there as well. So you can imagine you can capture a lot of notes as you move through a project. So when you want to import your model then into Revit, or into another authoring software tool, what you're going to want to do, you're going to want to save it in a particular format. So you just got to save. And on the left hand side here, you see you're presented with where your folder is located, and you've got an RCP file, which is a Recap Pro file. So that may be the format that you want to bring it into your particular element. But you can also use the import or the export options in the top bar. So publish, and under import, just go to export, hit export, and it gives you a series of different files. So you've got RCS, PTS, or E57 files. But because we're going to bring this into Revit, we don't need to do that. We can import it directly as a point cloud file. So all I've done here is just open up a blank Revit template. So what I want to do is then link in my point cloud file. So you can see when you hover over point cloud in your insert tab inside of Revit, both RCP and RCS files can be imported. So I'm just going to navigate to my location where my project is saved. So just when you're importing your point cloud file, it comes in as an RCP or an RCS file, but you can choose your positioning if you have a coordinate system set up. So I've imported this in the background now. You can see in my 3D environment, it's brought in my point cloud. You can assume that you'll have tidied up certain elements of this as well, now allowing you to start modeling within Revit. So to start modeling in Revit, you want to check in your elevation views that your particular floor levels have been created as well. So I can see here that my floor level is set at 0 here, and my second floor level is set. So you just want to make sure if your ground level happens to be your external level on the particular site that we have for this, you can create another level if you want, the same way you would for a building project. I'm just going to pull that down. So let's say we know that it's -3 meters or approximately. We can just pull our level line, and then I know that my site from one particular side, and we can again use our section box on this. So I'm just going to grab my line, just going to pull that down to my level where I know it is at. Go into my floor plan, maybe from a site view, and you can see your full point cloud there. So what I'm going to do is just going to start taking my wall tools. I'm just going to start modeling some walls. So it does actually snap to the walls. It doesn't pick lines, but it does actually snap to certain points as well. So I know that this element is my brick line wall as my center line. So all I'm going to do is just start modeling within Revit there. So I'm just going to click that there. And again, I'm just going to place the surrounding elements on this particular site because I know this is what was captured on location. And then just check my 3D view, see how that's looking. So you can see those walls are lining up nicely. My levels are quite off. Obviously, they were placed at the wrong level. So I want to place this, go back into my east elevation. Make sure that obviously your levels are named correctly. So I'm going to name this external level, ground level. Call this ground. Apply. Therefore, I know when I go back into my walls, selecting all my walls, I want my walls to be base constraint at my ground level. So just hit apply on that, and you can continue to do that for the rest of your project. You can also place some windows in here as well if that's what you want to do, and making sure that the windows are matching to the particular elements within this as well.
Okay, thank you everybody. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them through, unless you've seen any, Iqbal.
Yeah, I had one here from Laurenti. I think to do with particular when you were setting the overlap and balance. Shouldn't that be greater than 0%?
Shouldn't it be greater than 0%? Not if they all line up during the automatic registration process. If I captured the question right.
Okay, cool.
If it's registered accurately, it should be 0%.
Perfect. We haven't had any questions just yet. I think everybody's still digesting your information there, Jonathan. So this was a very informative webinar. Thanks very much for that. In terms of it was covering a lot of basics as well as covering tips. So it was good for people who haven't started yet, who want to get into using Recap Pro, as well as people who know what they're doing and just wanted a few reassurances on some things and some more tips for that. So hopefully that helped throughout the level of expertise on this webinar today. I have a few more. We got I imported scans using a low intensity setting recently, and the project was completely blank. Do you have any idea why that might be?
Low intensity settings. I'd have to have a look at the actual file. I can't comment on that at the moment. If you want to send it through or send through a screenshot, we can definitely take a look at it.
Yeah, please, if you can send that over. I think there's more to do with the particular scan, so we'll have to have a look at that. If you can send it over to us, support@cadpoint.co.uk, and we can have a look through it for you and see what exactly the issue might be. So yeah, we've got another question. How long does the registration process actually take in your experience?
It depends on first the power of your machine and your hardware, and obviously the size of your scan. For example, that particular one that I showed in the video, it took about 5 minutes for that one to register, and it depends if you've on your RAM and your SSD hardware as well.
Okay, yeah, so it really depends on your hardware, but it's not that long. It doesn't take super long. Depends on the point cloud data, doesn't it? Depending on how long, but it shouldn't take that long.
It shouldn't take that long. No. And in fairness, it is processing a lot of information.
Yeah. We've got another question. What is the difference between RCS and RCP in Revit?
So they're both native recap formats, as far as I know, and RCP is recap project, and RCS is recap cloud scan. So I'm not sure on the intricacies of the difference between them, but Revit can import both anyway.
And also looking to do more webinars, perhaps something on photogrammetry using Recap Pro. Is that something that can be done in Recap?
Yes, you can do photogrammetry in Recap.
Perfect. So yeah, we'll look into that for you, Jamie. If anything in the future, please let us know at our CADpoint email address, and we can look into doing that as well. Like I said, these are top 10 tips. We will be adding to these for point cloud data as well in the future. We've got a question here. I tried creating a point cloud with photos in the past. The created point cloud was completely on the wonk. so not good. Is there a way of aligning it with a grid or a floor?
Is this just photo? Is this just recap photo directly from photographs? No,
Yeah,
no
from
point cloud data.
photos. Yeah,
Yes,
photos.
you do have to do manual task of scaling the images yourself. Once you go in and lining them up as well. There's a couple of I can send through some Autodesk articles on that.
I've got something from somebody here. Is there any way to use a point cloud as a design element? So not creating a wall in position of a survey wall, and instead convert the survey point cloud into a Revit wall.
Unless you manually model it, no, there's no way to convert it in. You can show the point cloud in your model alongside if it's elevation views or 3D views, but obviously it may look pixely depending on the quality of the scan. But other than converting it to a wall, that's a manual modeling process.
Yeah, so you have to use, it's like a guide for you to use your modeling.
Exactly, it's like tracing over your
So you can't completely convert
drawings.
it in.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks very much, guys. I think we'll leave the questions there for now. I think we're heading on to time. But if there are any other questions, there's one more. Get this quickly in. Can you create a mesh from the point cloud? I think you can.
Yes, you can. Your point cloud is essentially a mesh in itself. It depends if you wanted that mesh to go to FBX or different types of format. There's also workflows for it to go to your preferred mesh format. Yes.
Yep, great. So we've got a few more questions coming in. What we'll do is we'll answer those. Me and Jonathan will look through them and answer those with the emails. So we've got your emails, and we'll send you some answers on that one. In terms of the low intensity question, you can send that to us if you can, and we can have a look at that for you. That's right. The point cloud is not actually a mesh, but it can be converted into a mesh. So again, if any other questions, please send them over. Would look out for our future events. We'll send emails to you to register for them, and we'll be announcing them soon. I think that's okay. If we probably, one more question. Which one? Can you use Dynamo to convert a point cloud into a model in Revit?
I don't know for sure. I haven't come across something myself that does it. There could be. Let us look into that.
We'll look into that for you. We'll get back to you on that one. Appreciate everybody joining us, and I hope you guys stay safe and have a good day. So take care, guys. Bye now.
Thank you all. Thank you.